The word Soma comes from a Greek word meaning body. In the Hindu Vedas, the oldest known religious text in the world, Soma is a drink with powerful effects. Soma helps individuals transcend the status quo and enter a divine state of being. We have drunk the Soma, we have become immortal, we have gone to the light, we have found the gods. Soma heals all who are sick. Circuit 3 and Circuit 4 programming creates a trap of symbolic reality and social roles that disconnect us from our bodies. In Circuit 5, the body's senses become heightened, creating a pleasurable, peaceful state in which we can readily express and receive love. Circuit 5 can be described in terms of mainstream science. For example, you may know that oxytocin and vasopressin are neuropeptide proteins released in the nervous system of all mammals. These neuropeptides can be seen as biological marks for our experience of empathy, compassion, trust, and affection. Oxytocin is called the love molecule in popular science media. But Circuit 5 can't be reduced to simple biological science. Circuit 5 experiences of harmony, beauty, peace, and unity are more than just molecular biology. First of all, the effects of oxytocin are not totally straightforward, no matter what popular science articles want you to think. I recently read an article that said kindness is a chemical. Yeah, okay, sure. The fact is, we can't just take an oxytocin pill and suddenly have a Circuit 5 experience. Circuit 5 is a felt experience of being alive in one's body. For me, being moved to tears, a warm feeling in one's chest, having a quiet mind and a sense of peace, having the hairs on your arms and the back of your neck stand up when listening to music, are all more useful indications of Circuit 5 activation than any molecule count in one's bloodstream. In part 4 of this lecture, I'll go into some detail about activating Circuit 5, but I think it's important to provide some examples of common ways we activate Circuit 5 without becoming aware of it. Parenthood. Parents often describe the meeting of their newborn as a complete perspective shift. Some describe a feeling of selfless love and care they've never experienced before. Granted, this doesn't happen with all parents. Music and dancing. These have been Circuit 5 activation methods since the dawn of time. Look at any ancient tribe. Consider that most native medicine people have used music, especially repetitive trance-like music, to bring about altered states, which they access in order to heal themselves and others. You can consider Sufi dervishes, Native American rain dances, African tribal dances for examples of the use of music and dance in traditional cultures. Repetition is key. Some early Greek prophets were called iatromantis. They used repetitive incantations to induce altered states of consciousness. I've personally played and sung with devotional Hindu music groups in events called kirtans, and I've personally experienced the powerful effect that singing chants can have on the body. You'd be hard-pressed to find any religious tradition without a musical component to it. One thing that hardened atheists and anti-religious people often do not understand is that devotional practices are a major Circuit 5 activation for many people. For some, true devotional practices are not just about believing in an intellectual idea of God. They're about experiencing a sense of harmony, love, peace, and unity through those religious practices. In other words, getting high on Jesus or Krishna is a real thing, as funny as that sounds, and I can personally attest to both. Meditation is often thought as some intellectual concentration to clear one's mind in a forceful act of thought repression. But actually, done right, meditation can be a Circuit 5 activation. I'll speak more about that in part 4. In athletics, there's something called getting in the zone, where the body is highly present and the mind seems to go quiet. People experience a deep sense of peace and focus during physical exertion. For example, runner's high is a common experience. This also happens in extreme sports like climbing and surfing. Spa activities can bring about similar experiences. For example, you have native traditions like sweat lodges that are intense and physically taxing. With travel, many of you know that there's a freshness and a richness that happens when visiting a new place while on vacation. Traditional Chinese medicine practices like acupuncture, tai chi, qigong can also activate circuit 5. Sexual experiences can and have been used consciously to activate circuit 5 for thousands of years. This is why we say someone is turning us on or we are turned on. Turn on means a circuit 5 activation. I'll speak more about that in part 4. Sex is used ritually by some who want to tap into the higher circuits. Some examples are Hindu tantric practices, the teachings of Mantak Chia, and Western occult sex magic. There'll be more about psychedelics in part 4 as well, but I'll mention some brief points now. A lot gets said about the wellness benefits of these substances. Marijuana has been used medicinally since ancient times. Microdosing LSD and psilocybin has been a trend for the past few years. Psychedelic and MDMA therapy are gaining mainstream respectability, and many of these substances are now being backed up by mainstream science. Study after study show that they can indeed be helpful, powerful tools for healing. But you cannot mistake the use of these substances for enlightenment or peace. Just because I put on glasses during the day to see well does not mean that my eyes have been cured. The same goes for every point on this slide. You might feel you've entered a state of ecstasy, love, and peace at a devotional religious service, at the peak of an LSD experience, or feel like the world is fresh and new after a traveling adventure, but sooner or later you'll be back home. The high comes down, and you're back to the usual status quo. Again, we'll cover this subject in part 4. When Christians talk about the peace that surpasses all understanding, they're referring to a strong circuit 5 activation. This is the state that most spiritual seekers are seeking. There are many names for a strong circuit 5 activation. We have love, Agape, which is a Christian term, Sita, HeartMind, Buddhist, the Bhav, Hindu. A very common sign of circuit 5 activation is the powerful sensation in the chest, hence the Buddhist term HeartMind. The Sacred Heart and Immaculate Heart in Catholicism are also a symbol of this. This seems to have a biological correlate in the body called the solar plexus. The solar plexus is a collection of nerves that serves as a central hub for the nervous system. The Hindu devotional kirtans that I mentioned in the previous slide can last for many hours or days. They involve singing repetitively to droning music, which sometimes gets really fast or sometimes gets really slow. It's common to leave the kirtan feeling as if you've taken drugs or are drunk. Some call this the bhav. It's truly getting high without taking anything. It's a great feeling. As mentioned before, art and music are the best expressions of the higher circuits, and that especially goes for Circuit 5. Paul McCartney, one of the Beatles, once said that what he's most proud of is that the majority of Beatles songs were about love. And I'll actually be mentioning the Beatles a few more times. I'm convinced that the incredible effect that they've had on society is due to the remarkable ability to activate their own higher circuits and help activate higher circuits in their listeners. When Circuit 5 is activated, there is a cheerfulness, merriment, and good humor that arises. This is the meaning of the Latin word hilaritas, according to Robert Anton Wilson. From the perspective of someone with a fully activated Circuit 5, Circuit 1 through 4 can look quite comical. All these behaviors we engage in day to day, all that game playing in the status quo, is pretty funny. There is a saying that you can know an enlightened being by their hilaritas, by their laugh. You see this cliche in fiction, the crazy master. An example of this is Yoda's original characterization in Star Wars, The Empire Strikes Back. There is something irrational about a strong Circuit 5 activation. Odd, non-conformist ideas seem to make more sense. These ideas seem to beg to be translated and communicated to others in non-traditional ways. The work of William Burroughs, James Joyce, Salvador Dali speak to this irrationality. This isn't outright stupidity and mindlessness. There's often a level of intelligence to the irrationality and silliness. The work of Monty Python, South Park, and the Beatles is clearly intelligent while at the same time indulging in funny absurdity. When I say irrational intelligence, I'm not talking about just being clever or irreverent. You might remember that art installation that sold for $120,000, which consisted of a banana taped to a wall. This was clever and irreverent, as is much of modern art. But for me, this is art at the level of Circuit 3. It comes from the intellect. For me, true art is inspired from a Circuit 5 high and activates a Circuit 5 high in others. In other words, it is art that comes from the heart and activates the heart in others. This is what I experienced firsthand in the work of Michelangelo. When I visited Italy, I was interested in seeing some classic artwork, but I didn't expect much, to be honest. I was happy to visit the Vatican, and corridor after corridor of artwork was nice to see, but it didn't seem very special to me. And then I walked into the Sistine Chapel, and I was just taken aback when I looked up. I had to sit down. It was a rapturous feeling. It was just so wonderful. Similarly, I went to Florence and I saw a replica of the David outdoors, and it was fine. It looked like all the photos of the David I've seen in my life. It was stressful getting tickets to see the real David, but my partner at the time really wanted to see it. When we made it inside and we turned the corner to finally see the original David, I felt frozen in place. It seemed otherworldly and transcendent, just incredibly stunning. Michelangelo created true art from a Circuit 5 activation, in my opinion, and he can still activate Circuit 5 in others even hundreds of years later. I'm not saying that something old is better or modern art sucks. This is about a feeling in the body. C.G. Jung called this kind of bodily understanding the feeling function. With a Circuit 5 activation, there is a consistent sense of well-being, peace, and safety, even in the face of adversity. You may have heard of the incredibly successful spiritual teacher Eckhart Tolle. He describes a state of inner peace and harmony, which is essentially the Circuit 5 state. In this state, Tolle says that there is a sense of timelessness and stillness regardless of what's happening in the world around you. Tolle says that this state provides access to incredible spiritual power, which he calls the power of now. The guru figure J. Krishnamurti called this choiceless awareness. For me personally, all of this has become very cliche and glib. You can find inspirational quotes about living in the present moment and stillness all over social media. It makes my eyes roll back almost every time I see this sort of thing. But the fact is, there's truth to it. And to ground this in some mainstream pop science, I can't pronounce his name very well, so I'll just call him by his first name. Psychologist Mihaly C. wrote a very popular book called Flow. He said that people experience joy and peace when they're fully absorbed in the present moment. He called this flow, and it happens to many, especially those who are excellent at their chosen profession or hobby. He talked about the connection between the flow state and the body, referencing the ancient Greeks who believed that education should start with practices to better inhabit their bodies before moving on with intellectual pursuits. Fun fact, by the way, Plato, the most well-known philosopher, was originally a wrestler. He made his name and fame as a wrestler in ancient Greece. According to Mihaly C., in order to activate and sustain a flow state, silence and alone time is required. Again, I sound like a broken record, but we'll return to this in part 4. Some of you may remember the Pixar film WALL-E, where people in the future are glued to their screens. They go about their entire life totally tuned into their screens. They eat without awareness of what they're doing. They're so caught up in the status quo and in their Circuit 1 to Circuit 4 imprints that they even forget how to walk. And this happens to a lot of us. We go through life disconnected from our own bodies. It's almost like the sensation of being embodied has been shut down. It's common for people to lose awareness of their living, breathing, sensory apparatus. It's almost as if we're just disembodied heads walking around. I covered these Circuit 5 activations back in the Circuit 5 section, but just want to put these back up on screen. The downside to most of these is that they require you to do something for Circuit 5 to activate. It's like you need to take action to get high. And with every high, there's a come down. Now, I'm not criticizing these activation methods. If this is how you turn on, go for it. It's wonderful to feel the peace of a Circuit 5 vibe of being in the present moment. But, and I'm just telling you how it is, become dependent or even addicted to your favorite Circuit 5 activation. If your favorite Circuit 5 activation is not consistently available to you, then you're stuck in the status quo.